Right.
Hello, good evening.
No, good morning. Welcome to Creative Brain Week. My name is Dominic Campbell. I'm MC off and on for the rest of the week, and I'm joined by some fantastic people in Trinity College, Dublin. I'd like to start firstly by welcoming to the stage the Provost of Trinity College, Dublin, Linda Doyle.
Thank you, everybody. I actually am really, really delighted to be here. I'm also honoured to be Provost of Trinity because I get to work with amazing people like we have here. So it's really, really great to be here today and this morning. It's very hard to be at any event at the moment without briefly acknowledging the wider context in which the world sits. Not alone are we still coming out of a pandemic, we are in a space where the world is under serious threat, our democracy is under threat with the war in Ukraine, and I think it's something that's on all of our minds. But when I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about the values that this event espouses and is part of. And those values are values about really tapping into the creativity of the brain. They're about brain health equality. They're about giving voice to communities who don't get heard, for example, communities with brain disease. And they're about bringing together the minds, the creative minds of us all. And I was thinking, you know, if the battle lines of the future are battle lines around ideas, then the world would be in a much better place. And I think this is the kind of thing that you guys stand for, and this is why I'm delighted that this inaugural Creative Brain Week is happening. So really, really pleased. I think it's a fantastic idea that you've put this amazing event together. And what we're doing is we're exploring how brain science and creativity can connect to seed new ideas in all sorts of spaces, in social development and technology and entrepreneurship and culture, well-being, physical and mental and brain health across the whole life cycle. And I think that's a really, really, really powerful thing to be focusing on. This event is going to be an annual event. I think we're delighted that this is the kick-off event. And I had the pleasure of actually sitting down with Dominic and Brian and Ian to go through the programme a number of, probably a month or so ago now. And actually the meeting never stopped because there was, as Dominic, as you went through it, there was more and more and more and more. And I think it speaks to the depth and the breadth of the programme and the excitement of it. And what was particularly amazing, I felt, is that we had kind of captured the research that's coming out of various places across the world, but also captured the creativity, the music, the art. And as we sit here, actually, we have somebody in the front row for people who can't see, busily drawing, which to me completely captures what we're here. We're here to bring the mind and that creativity together. So I think it's an exciting programme, and certainly for us, it's the start of where we want to go over the coming years to explore and promote the relationships between creativity, the brain, and all areas of our lives. I don't want to say much more other than to say, you know, we wouldn't be here without the help of a lot of people. So this is funded by Trinity College Dublin Wellcome Trust Institutional Strategic Support Fund. That's a little... Harry Hartford, Trinity alumnus and president of Causeway Capital Management. I absolutely have to say we wouldn't be here without the amazing people on stage. Dominic's going to be introducing everyone properly in a minute, but certainly their leadership in the project, you know, Brian Lawlor, Ian Robertson, Patten, Nick Johnson, are inspiring people to work with, and they're even more inspiring through how they kind of bring these kind of things together. And what you actually have here is a mix of disciplines from across the university, and one of the things I'm always very proud of is where the disciplines reach out to each other and something better and more comes about through the fact that you guys are coming together and working on this. Of course, I do want to thank all of those in the Global Brain Health Initiative, faculty, researcher, staff, Atlantic Fellows who are speaking. There's actually 120 speakers from across the world, and I think, again, that's pretty amazing. And to be able to do this in these times, I think, is astounding and speaks to the creativity of the event. As you know, we have a mix of real and online. It's a real pleasure actually to be here and have the real experience, but I also know I'll be tapping into some of the things online for the week, so it's fantastic. I think it's really delighted to see this very, very inclusive and cross-departmental initiative. And also, of course, I want to thank Dominic for all his work in curating this, and the Creative Ageing International for developing the event programme and leading the organisation. And of course, the Atlantic Institute for ongoing support. So I am very, very delighted to be here on a Saturday morning involved in something so joyous, so creative, so interdisciplinary and so inspiring, and I wish you all the best with the week, and I'm delighted to say the event is open. Well,
Thank you, Provost. Thank you so much. Thank you, Provost. So, how do we start? Well, beginnings are so important. What we thought we would do is start with a little bit of the sense of how this project developed and why. So I'm delighted to be joined on stage by Professor Eve Patten, by Professor Ian Robertson, by Professor Brian Lawlor, and by Professor Nick Johnson. And as the Provost said, from different departments across Trinity College Dublin. And what we're going to do is really in two sections. So the first section is about the why. And then we promised ourselves that we wouldn't do a tell without a show. So then we're going to have a little bit of a creative experiment. So I'd like to hand over to Professor Nicholas Johnson.
Thank you so much, Dominic, and thank you, Provost, as well for that introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here, and my representation here is in a couple of different hats. So in my day job, the daily role is as an associate professor in the Department of Drama at the Samuel Beckett Center. And what I love about the Samuel Beckett Center on campus is that it's positioned very neatly at the intersection between what's commonly considered the arts half of campus, where there's the so-called arts block, a bunch of the legacy of literature. Very nearby, we're a stone's throw from Samuel Beckett's old rooms, for which we are named. And we are also right at the intersection of engineering, and as we move toward the Hamilton building, the science end of campus, so-called, we live not, I think, at an intersection of these pathways between students traveling one to the other, but actually a kind of entanglement, something which is not a binary between arts and science, but something which is densely woven. And so the people who come through our building are doing industrial technology. Theater is an engineering technology. It's dependent on technologies. We study and have research projects there on virtual reality, on interdisciplinary interactions with computer science, with arts and health, with a huge range of issues that you might not first think of when you think of theater. And the second hat that I wear, and I think the reason that I originally came into the room in these conversations about this week, is because I also convened the Creative Arts Practice research theme. And that is one of the college 26 research themes run through the research office, which is a kind of representative organizational structure for trying to discuss interdisciplinarity at the top level in research collaboration in the university. So the notion of this is that I think the helpful tagline is we talk about the freedom to imagine with the power to change. So we're trying to connect collaborators who might have an arts background or an arts interest with researchers who might need to access the knowledge that creativity has unlocked. We're also encouraging researchers who are working in areas they might not think of as creative arts relevant to draw on the creative arts and creativity for expression, for impact, for experimentation, and to really truly integrate the work that we do as academics, as researchers, to not necessarily think in disciplinary boxes and lines, but to think about human problems at the level all the way from the infrastructure of the human. So I'm thinking here about the brain, the nervous system, and the ways that might be deployed in these types of projects. So the range of approaches that we take in these discussions is the first thing I'd like to call attention to. We have different ways of talking about disciplines in the university. One is multidisciplinary, which is when we're all sitting together at the table and talking from our own perspective. There are then interdisciplinary research projects where we genuinely try to link up and connect and speak through our different expertises and really genuinely share research questions and methods It's not instrumental. It's not one using the other for something, for impact or for funding purposes or for these things, but really trying to get to the heart of a question from the diversity of perspectives. And the research is very strong that this type of diversity of perspective leads to better outcomes. It leads to more salience, it leads to more meaning, it leads to developed longer-term potential than we could otherwise have. And the last term you may have heard is transdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary problems are the things that really do affect us all. And these are things like massive technological change, like the rise of digital culture and computers. They are things like climate change and ecology and the ecological threat that we all exist under, whatever discipline we come from. And they are things like the war in Ukraine. They're things that will transform ways that we have to think, ways that we have to do business, ways that we have to interact as educators, as researchers, and as a university. So this is where I think we really live here in the transition between the interdisciplinary questions and the major transdisciplinary questions of our time. And we believe, as an article of faith and from our own experiences, personally and as researchers, that in order to address the future, in order to grow as people, as a university, we will all need to share what we know and the ways that we know. And in my last 30 seconds, what I'll say is that for me, this is quite personal. I came from a theater background as a child actor. And my growth, I always thought of how they talk about falling in love with the theater as being bitten by a bug. And I think this is kind of interesting. It's kind of medical. It's a little pathological. You know, this idea that I've gotten some kind of change in my DNA or some kind of disease, you know, that causes me at the age of 7 to want to go out and stand in front of people and improvise or take risks, you know, in studio. And I think that in my life, I've seen gradually, as I moved from acting to directing to running theater companies to running events, and now to a university environment where I'm teaching and researching and sharing this, I don't see any difference from those original impulses, which I think express something that Linda said in the opening comment about the idea of inclusion, of community, and of living our values, the values of being together with other people, putting in the work around the difficulty of organizing a hard challenge, and that we're willing to invest in the risk and the danger in those kinds of spaces. And I see a lot of continuity between what inspires me about a university and a setting like this and a program like this, a week like this, and those first impulses that reached out and grabbed me and said, you know, under the lights, on the stage, in the way, something exciting and potentially very important is happening here. So with that, I'll hand over to Professor Brian Lawlor. And Brian is, I'm going to get the title exactly right, Deputy Executive Director of the Global Brain Health Institute, and also here at Trinity, Professor of Old Age Psychiatry. So a great honor to present Brian, and here he is.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. You're a very hard act to follow. So just before I start, just a thought about people in Ukraine and just, I guess what the war, the effect that's going to have on people's brain health, the trauma. And, I think as Linda was saying, if we could bring to bear, the creative brain in terms of conflict resolution, I think would be wonderful. And perhaps maybe we'll get some clues from this week about that. So I'm a psychiatrist, not an actor, and I'm used to listening rather than speaking, but I'm going to do my best here to be as creative as possible and improvise. But for me, creativity is it's not just about creating something new or useful. I mean, I think it's about the process, and it's about the doing, and about making progress. And for that reason, I think creativity is for everybody. And I spent the last 30 years looking after people, caring for people with dementia, and working with their families. And so I think it's very, very important that I think creativity is for all. And as I say, you don't have to produce something new, but if you can get in the flow, have the experience, I think that's really what's so important to me. So my interest as a psychiatrist and working in the Global Brain Health Institute is around, creativity and its relationship to brain health. And can we get a better handle, a new understanding of the brain science of creativity and how this might inform or advance how we can improve people's brain health, but potentially delay the onset of dementia, or actually even prevent dementia. So that may seem like a very tall order, but we've got some creatives here in the audience, I know, but when you see somebody, as I have over the last 30 years, when you see somebody with the later stages of dementia and responding, for example, to their grandson when he's playing a musical instrument and singing. And that person gets into the flow of it and starts to move and sing. And for that moment is completely coordinated, fluent, normal. And that can even persist for hours, sometimes even days, that sense of well-being, that sense of optimism. Something has happened there. So in that creative moment, that creative process, something has happened. There are pathways, circuits that are dormant or inhibited in that individual's brains that were kindled by this creative process. So there's something really powerful about creativity, but I think we need to understand it more and see how we can tap into these circuits to preserve, restore, and possibly maintain a brain function. So when I think about creativity and brain health, I think they've got an awful lot in common. So they're intrinsically connected, they're bidirectional, so creativity can improve brain health, but also brain health can drive creativity. We develop creativity and our brain health over our lifespan, so that's in common as well. But creativity and brain health are both strong health-promoting values. And I think they're potentially achievable by everybody, and including their people with dementia. So there are many examples, I think, of how creativity, and we're going to see this during this week, about how creativity can improve mental health, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, how creativity and creative practice can improve the lives of people living with dementia for the moment, in the moment, but that can persist. For people with Parkinson's disease, dance can improve motor function, can improve their memory, cognition. But in spite of the fact that we have many testimonies about the benefits of creativity for people living with dementia and about the effectiveness and about interventions in this space, there are many, many gaps in terms of the evidence. And so I think we really need to talk about that. How do we fill those gaps? How do we develop more evidence? How do we understand, how do we gain better knowledge about this dormant or inhibited circuitry so that we can really, really tap into this and improve the lives of people living with dementia, and as I said, potentially protect their brains, protect all our brains. So I think this is for Global Brain Health Institute, that's very much the sweet spot. We're trying to bring arts and science together for brain health. We want to develop new ways, new methods, new interventions in the arts to benefit people's brain health, but also to understand the circuitry, the mechanism that underpins creativity. So for me, as a psychiatrist and working in the Global Brain Health Institute, Creative Brain Week is a meeting of minds. It's bringing two worlds together, arts and science, and it's trying to understand how we can release and utilize creativity to improve our brain health and our quality of life. So I'm just delighted to introduce on my left, Greg.
Me next.
I'm delighted to introduce Professor Eve Patten, who is Professor of English Literature.
Indeed.
And she's going to give her perspective on creativity.
Thank you very much, Brian, and good morning, everyone. And you'll not be surprised, I'm going to make you listen to some poetry.
Excellent.
The brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one the other will contain with ease, and you beside. Emily Dickinson, of course. I'm Eve Patten. I'm the director of Trinity's Arts and Humanities Research Institute, which is the Trinity Long Room Hub. And we represent research in the arts and humanities disciplines, and we also are very committed to interdisciplinarity. So it's a tremendous opportunity for the Long Room Hub to collaborate with our colleagues in neuroscience and in many other disciplines in this inaugural Creative Brain Week. But I have to say, I also have a very strong personal interest in creative brain. I've been a professor in Trinity now, or I've been a lecturer in literature for over 20 years, and I was just thinking that in that time I have very, very rarely stopped to think about the connection between the processes that go on in the human brain and the novels, the poetry, the stories that I discuss with my students on a daily basis. This is an opportunity to try to build that bridge. Even in this particular year, in 2022, when we're marking the centenary of the great novel Ulysses, which tells the story of an ordinary man's brain and its responses to walking around Dublin on an ordinary day in 1904. Even with that, I don't think I'd thought enough about the connections between literary creativity and the science of the brain. So the Creative Brain Week is giving me an opportunity to think about these connections and to ask, how does a writer's brain function? How does a reader's brain work when we're reading literature? And why is creativity so important to our health and well-being, as Brian and Nick have already said? So these are key questions for me, for understanding literature better, and for thinking a bit more about what we can do with the help of our colleagues in other disciplines, and particularly in neuroscience. I think the week is also about me turning back again to the many writers who have written about the brain and tried to dramatize on the page those mental processes that go on in the act of creating and that define, I think, something of our humanity. I began with the American poet Emily Dickinson. The brain is wider than the sky. But of course, so many other poets, so many other novelists have explored and tried to document the processes of creativity as a way of understanding our own human brain. My office up in the Trinity Long Room Hub looks out on the Provost's garden, and very frequently I'm visited by Sam, who is the Trinity fox, the official Trinity fox, who comes up outside my window and looks in at me. When this happens, I'm always reminded of a poem by the English poet Ted Hughes called The Thought Fox. And in this poem, the thought fox pictures a fox as an idea that moves through dark forests, minding its own business until, with a sudden sharp stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still, the clock ticks, the page is printed. Well, creativity doesn't always come as easily into the dark hole of the head as Ted Hughes' poem might suggest. And of course, many writers that we read today, I think, are helping us to understand the brain as we go through difficulties, as we experience illness, aging, depression, dementia, the various conditions that Brian was talking about. And these are often very moving pieces of literature, and I think this week is an opportunity to reflect on them again. I was fortunate enough recently to hear the Northern Irish poet Leontia Flynn read her amazing poem Alzheimer's Villanelle, which is a poem about her own father's slow descent into what she writes about as the slow, quick, slow disease that is Alzheimer's, and to becoming, in fact, a stranger in his own home. And on Monday evening in the Trinity Long Room Hub, at our Literature and the Creative Brain panel, we're going to be hearing about the fantasy writer Terry Pratchett, who was a great friend to Trinity, and we have his archives here. And we're going to be hearing about how he wrote so movingly about his own diagnosis of a form of dementia and what this meant for his writing practice. So it's not only from literature, but right across the arts and humanities that I think we can find the stories of the human brain that we need to put together some pieces of the jigsaw that we'll have in Creative Brain Week, to find stories of the human brain in all its creative capacity, but also in its weakness and its fragility. And I'm so pleased that I'm able to help to bring this perspective to the various wonderful discussions and conversations that we're going to be having over the next few days. Thank you. And I'm now going to introduce, on my right, co-director of the Global Brain Health Institute and the distinguished neuropsychologist Ian Robertson.
Thank you very much. just to say a tribute to Dominic Campbell, who's one of our alumni, one of our senior fellows from the Global Brain Health Institute, who has really put this amazing, with B. Kelleher, put this amazing event together. Dominic, you've done an amazing job. You are an exemplar of the kind of person at the interface of arts and science and practice that really the world needs many more of you. So I want to just mention three things. One is about where humanity is at the moment, then about values and morals, and then about human uniqueness. So until the kind of 18th century, we really lived in a world of gods, where our man's and humankind's fate was determined by forces we didn't understand that we tried to appease. Then came the incredible Enlightenment, the discovery of the scientific method, the valuing of rationality, and suddenly, for a while, until mid-20th century, we felt like machines. We were part of impersonal laws guiding our behavior, and the incredible culminating in the theory of relativity in the first half of the 20th century. Then DNA was cracked, the code was cracked in the early 50s, Crick and Watson. And suddenly we were now, it was the era of biology. And the timescales of all of these things, you can see the exponential curve going on there. The era of physics was 300 years, the era of biology was scarcely 50 years, and it's still generating incredible stuff. But I would submit to you now that in the 21st century, we're now in a new era. We're in the era of mind, where actually the critical commodity is information. All the great industries, most of the biggest industries deal in information. And so that means that the battlefield, to use that horrible metaphor, is the whole issues, the future of humankind depends on what we do with our minds. And so that brings me on to the second thing about values and morality. And the provost was saying, and you as well, Nicholas, were talking about values and the values of this institution, the values of the enterprise, the values of the Global Brain Health Institute. How absolutely critical these are for the future of humanity. And the reason for this, both the creative process and science and scholarship, they're all moral enterprises. Why? Because they're enterprises where the individual practitioner is a vehicle for the information, not an ego trying to control the information or to control the energy. So one of the problems we have in Ukraine just now is we have essentially a problem of narcissistic egos. That's essentially the problem, is vast pathological egotism, which is causing misery and death. I do not believe that if someone felt impelled by the creative process, impelled by the journey of discovery that is scholarship and science, I do not believe they would ever succumb to this ghastly addiction that is the addiction to power. So the creative process, and I include that in arts and science and scholarship, is a huge antidote to some of these incredible traps of the mind and of the brain, because the addiction to power is as powerful as the addiction to heroin. So that brings me to the third question of human uniqueness. We have approximately 20,000 genes. And these genes there's too few of them to possibly encode all the various manifestations and flowering of human behavior. What they do is they endow us with these tendencies, with these propensities. But with our 80 billion neurons, and each neuron having up to 20,000 connections with other neurons, and probably a couple of trillion experiences over a lifetime, the computational the computational dimensions of this mean you end up with a number of possible constellations of the human brain, which is greater than the number of atoms in the universe. What that means, however, is a very significant and a very critical personal, for all of you in this room and all of you watching, a personally critical moral imperative and a redemptive imperative. You are utterly unique in the universe. Every single person in the world has a unique perspective on this incredible thing we call consciousness. On, who knows, maybe the universe just is consciousness. That's a very dominant physical and theory at the moment in physics, about maybe part of one vast simulation here. That's not that's science fiction, that's a possibility. So what are the implications of that if every single human being on the planet is utterly unique? That is something to inspire awe. It's something to inspire values. It's something to inspire meaning. And it's something to inspire the desire for every single one of us to want to express that uniqueness in our contribution to the universe slowly becoming more aware of itself, which is, I believe, the teleological journey that the universe is in. Thank you.
So, it's been my great pleasure to spend months talking and conversing and trying to create a program, an initial program about Creative Brain Week with these extraordinary people. And one of the things we talked about a lot is the importance of fun and the importance of play and the importance of the unique viewpoint, as Ian just said. And so we wanted to find a way of sharing that with you. And so what we're going to do now is a little bit of a kind of live experiment, which I thought was easy and everybody else went, I'm not so sure about that. So I'd like you as a generous audience to engage in this play with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash up some slides, and we're going to get 5 slides each. And these are slides that no one here has seen before. And we're going to use them as a stimulus. So everybody gets about 3 minutes. They get about 30 seconds a slide, something a little bit like that, to talk about what they see. It will be a unique moment, and we will go and see how we can go from there. I can see them up there, I think. So we might not. We should be able to put them up here.
Will they be visible there?
Can we see them in the back?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I do one.
It's called PowerPoint karaoke.
Guess whose idea this was?
Guess who idea this wasn't? Can I make that a large slide? Are we good? We're good. Great. Okay.
I can't see that.
Can you see from there, Nicholas, or do you want to go here?
I can see from here. I'll do my best. So what this looks like to me is a winning cake from the Great British Bake Off. And I believe that this was a prompt that was about our ecological future and community. And what was really wonderful is all the contestants got together and lifted it up in the final finale of the season. Beware of artists. They mix with all classes of society and are therefore the most dangerous. This is a sign that I passed on my way into the nursing building to deliver a lecture on creativity and nursing. And we had a little bit of conflict discussion at the very beginning about this, and ultimately we gradually moved them from one side of the room where they said they're not creative, all the way to the other side where they said they are. I know what it is, so I'm going to bypass what it is. So no, that's fine. You can go back. I'm just trying to modify. So the Trinity Arts Workshop down on Pierce Street, just a few moments down from here, develops experiments with chalk, and they celebrate every year a giant festival of chalk. It's Diwali. Yeah. I was trying to get away from the tradition. Can't see that. Yes, this is someone who is holding up the letter C, And they're explaining the difference between small c creativity, which is what we do all of the time in our life when we have to solve a kind of limited problem or confront the void of the page, and explaining how that can sometimes become the big C, where actually by starting to solve these little problems, we gradually become a little bit more aware of our potential as actual makers, actual artists, actual even professionals in the field at any stage of life.
And your last one?
And my last one. Yes, an artifact from just a few nights ago, coming out to greet my two sons in the house, and a famous foot treatment that's known for this. It's kind of an acupuncture thing when you're walking around the street at night or in your house at night barefoot, and you tread on this. It really kind of wakes you up, makes you alert, and it's my sons are developing these kind of little traps that they lay around there to make sure that I'm staying alert in the evening.
Thank you so much. Can I just read your mic? Let me just do that. There we go. Okay. Ready?
Break a leg, Brian.
First one.
Oh, this is really how I'm feeling right now, and it's just a huge pressure on my brain, on my creativity, pressing in on my nose and in my eyes. I'm really feeling it right now. Oh, I just love to see people laugh and enjoy themselves. I mean, there's such wonderful there, the communication between these two individuals, the smiling, the joking, the connection. Different generations. This is such a lonely place to be, sitting there on your own, isolated, lost. Aleppo, Ukraine. I'd love to reach out to be able to help someone like that right now. Turn it. Why is this person turning up their nose at me? Pricking their ears, listening to me, looking down on me.
And that's your last one? Eve? Oops. Are we quick? And I think that might. Yeah, great. Okay. Eve, ready?
Yep, trying to subdue my terror. Go ahead. Hit me. Are they continents, worlds in bubbles? And I suppose our job in Creative Brain Week is to break through the membrane of the bubbles and actually see what's going on beneath them. I hope that'll do. Oh, I knew you'd give me the difficult ones. I can't even see what that is. All right, so I'm going to use the idea of a lack of clarity here. And what we've got, this is a great slide, because the technology is right there in focus, but the person is blurred in the background. And do we lose sight of the human when we go for the science? And the same here with the brain. Look at it. My colleagues to my right will see all the neurons that are lighting up and all the threads that link the brain together, and what I'm seeing is color. What I'm seeing is a work of art. So can we bridge those divides and bring our two perspectives into alignment a bit more effectively?
It's a COVID kit.
Do you know, this is a good one too, because last Christmas I was delighted to see just how many people on Twitter had transformed their lateral flow tests into Christmas tree decorations. And if that isn't evidence of creativity, I don't know what is. And recycling for sustainability. And these are people, I think, leaving each other, greeting each other. So it's above everything else, human connection. And after everything that Ian has talked about and the crisis that the Provost alluded to, the context of, that we're all enduring at the moment and witnessing going on in Ukraine, this is what's going to matter in the end, that we have that human connection. Because, as Ian's been saying, it's only through that, with that moral compass that human connection gives us, that we can defeat the kind of tyranny that we're seeing going on. So, delighted to see that one appear. Delighted I'm finished, I hope.
So there's there is what I thought about this morning when I woke up, which is what idiot conceived of this torture? And I kind of compose my anxiety by saying, look, you're only a fragment of the universe. It doesn't matter. Your ego's an illusion. So, yeah. So that's the way I felt. So bring it on, Dominic. Bring it on. So I once did I was a complete dunce in school for art, as far as art was concerned, and I was made to feel insignificant by my art teacher because I remember just having this concept of myself as I'm unartistic. I can't do anything, and I think, what on earth would it have been like if that had been my experience academically? What is it like if I had been? I know my father was made to feel like that by a teacher. He was made to feel stupid, and he wasn't stupid, but it blighted his life. So anyway, this makes me think of friends wanted to make up numbers in a pottery in a sculpture course for a weekend, and I found my hands shaping a head from clay. And it was like an external force. It was just my hand. I wasn't controlling this thing. Now, it was a fine head. It was far from a work of art. I now have this urge to mold more human heads. My father was the same. He painted the same painting. He took to painting late at life, and he was brought up in a mill, an old water mill in the island of Bute. And he painted the same painting, I'd say, about 50 times. But it was in his mind, this image he was trying to capture from his childhood. And this is how I spend, in this two-dimensional hell, I spend most of my life, and I have to get more tactile. I have to get engaged with the world in more conventional ways. And yeah, this was Brian after a night out last night. And we had to get him down from the
Last one.
And yes, this is one of the younger members of our community who's demonstrating that empowerment is any age, and it's all up to play for. Yeah.
So I'd like to thank you all for your contributions, generosity, and that's me, is it? And willingness to play. And this week is all about exploring and trying out new things. You'll see, if you're here in Dublin in the Nocturne Institute, there's an exhibition to explore, to see other people's creativity around the city. If you're watching online, we can share some of that, but actually it's not quite as good as if you're here. You get to miss the improvisation, you get to miss proximity, you get to miss connection, you get to miss whatever it is that happens when human beings interact with each other, as we've been lucky enough to listen to this morning. We have one last thing to do before we go. We want to show you a short film. It's a taster of a work in progress, a piece that isn't yet finished. And if we can do that, just give us a moment while we settle in. And if not, we might come back to it.
Do you want to do questions and answers?
We can do that. Yeah, we've got a few minutes. You good for questions and answers?
Sure.
Sure.
You've done the difficult bit now.
Exactly. Relax now.
We can take a few questions. If there's any questions at the start of the week, there will be at the end. We have questions. Fantastic.
Okay, maybe is this working? Yeah, maybe I can start off. Hello, I'm Sarah. Okay, just a kind of big question. Where do you think Creative Brain Week will be in 3 years' time?
Nick.
Was that too difficult?
I would say
I think what is so exciting about what we have happening now is that this is really a laboratory to find out where the really interesting bits are. And because this is an act which is inclusive of researchers here, artists in the community, and then the public, members of the community, our hope is to be guided. Our hope is to listen and observe and see what is the most interesting, enticing material that really wakes people up to this potential and to this idea. And so I would hope for sustainability, and that's really my main hope. I would put that before I would put growth, in a 3-year range. But I think sustainability over a longer period and allowing it to actually really reflect what the community desires and needs and is interested in, those would be my 2 hopes for it.
Thank you.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. Oh, we have a question from the front, so you have to run downstairs.
Sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. Exercise is important for creativity.
Thank you. Ian, you used the phrase that addiction to power is as powerful, as strong as addiction to heroin. And how can you break the power addiction?
There's only 2 ways. One is external constraints, which is why human civilization invented democracy, free press, independent judiciary, why you try and have governance, proper governance structures. So these are the external constraints. The only other antidote is the internal constraints, the morals, the feeling that there's something bigger than you. The problem with power addiction is you begin to feel godlike, and that is a ghastly narcissism that allows you to do terrible things to a lot of people. So it's harder to feel godlike if you feel constrained by a set of values that are inside your own head. And you can actually measure people's propensity for, if you like, their appetite for power being tempered by that, by the frequency of nots, don'ts, and shouldn'ts in their free speech.
That's really interesting.
And there's not many of them in Vladimir Putin's speech. Yeah.
Question? Okay. Oh, you're great.
I bet you're surprised that I'm going to speak.
No?
I have Lewy body dementia. You spoke about Humanities, creative brain week, and there's a vision in my head of that 11-year-old boy in Ukraine. I'm so delighted you brought it up the other day. He walks 700 miles with a backpack and a phone number written on his hand. And to me it just shows that the brain, I don't think we have any idea the capabilities. And that what he did for me was, he gave me the ambition, don't ever, ever, ever give up. Even when he was walking along that road, staggering, crying at 11 years of age. He's gone through more than any of us would ever dream of going through in 1,000 lifetimes. But it's that resilience that's inside in the brain. I think it's an untapped well, and that even right now, we're only at the very, very, very surface of it. Because one of the scans you had of the brain with all the colours in it, it looked like my dad's skin.
Yeah.
But would you agree that the brain is, the potential we have when you look at the 11-year-old boy is unbelievable?
I agree, Kevin, and the potential for network brains is infinitely more if we get to network ourselves together. Absolutely. Huge potential.
Can I just add, I think there's great potential for creativity to increase hope. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. Creativity can be a very powerful message for hope.
I love the fact the questions are always as far apart in the room as you can manage to get without actually going outside of the room.
I'm not sure if this turned on.
Yeah, perfect.
First of all, I'm just delighted to be here. I reached the ripe age of 70 recently, and I got quite a shock. And I discovered why Dunn stores say €1.99 and not €2. I didn't mind being 69. I found 70 to be quite different. I just want to say one word this morning that there were all of them I loved, but there was one really struck me. This is a laboratory. This is not a finished product. And that we're all invited to be part of that journey. And that, to be invited into that space, I think it just is so wonderful that for the next 20 or 30 years, I genuinely want to be actively part of my own growth. But on your own, it's not as easy as if you're part of a collective. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Wow. Wonderful.
Dominic, may I just say to that, that's so wonderful to hear. But we're feeling that too, because I'm on this journey too. And this week is going to be such a learning experience for me. And to be in that role again of learning rather than lecturing is just a delight. So very, very welcome comment, and thank you.
So we're all delighted that you're joining us on this learning journey. We are learning how to make things work. We're going to end with a short film, about which more later. And if you'd like to roll the video.
Mr. McDonald?
We know that dementia is not part of old age. Dementia is a disease.
There are good days and there are bad days.
Cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, head trauma, lack of literacy. These are all very potent risk factors for degenerative disease in elders.
It's a very tight link to equity. There's a continuous search for things that you have lost. Keys, bags, names, words.
However, there is good news.
There are ways to improve symptoms around dementia. There are ways to target risk factors before developing symptoms.
I think we have a tendency to look at older people with what they cannot do. What we want to change is this negative narrative. Change our mindset.
How can people with dementia have a voice and not be stigmatized? How to help communities use their existing resources to support people with dementia. And also how to push science forward.
I'd like to thank the first panellist. It's always great to get off to a flying start. I'd like to thank you, Patten. I'd like to thank Brian Lawlor, Ian Robertson, Nicholas Johnson. I'd like to thank you. And we'll reconvene after a short break for the next session. Thank you very much for starting.
Thank you.
Thank you.